we're going to start creating controls on our character by focusing on the back. Now the purpose of creating controls is to create easy access to parts of our rigs that are hard for animators to select. Now in this case, our joints for our back are definitely difficult to select because we have to go through the geometry, but also they have translation values that we would never want the animator to be messing around with. So we'll create controls to make a much more controlled and easy access to these joints. Now our next thing is, what are we creating controls for? Well, the hip joint needs a control, the first back joint needs a control, and every sequential joint all the way up to the waist here. So each one of these will be controls. Now the neck will have a control along with the head. Okay, so let's go over and start creating some controls. So these controls on our back, circles are going to be great for these. So I'm just going to create a NURB circle. And there's our circle. I can just drag it away here. And I'm just going to duplicate this and bring it up. So I'm just going to hold down V and I'm going to snap it right onto our joint. Now, I typically will hide my geometry at this point so I can easily see my joints and access them. So I'm going to hold down V and I'm snapping right onto the joint. Now I'm going to duplicate this for each one of the joints going up in the back. Like that. It is very important it's exactly right on the joint itself. The pivot point's exactly on that. Now I am going to create one more for the neck, and I'm not going to do it for the head yet. We'll see why in a second. Okay, so they're on perfectly. So now I need to bring back my character. And the reason why we do this is because not only do these controls have to be single select, but they also have to be easy to see. Now this first one's not too bad, but I'm going to scale them out so that they're a little bigger. And the reason why we chose circles here is because it encapsulates the entire character. So no matter what point I look at the character, I can see these controls very easily. You can see how these ones kind of just disappeared right into the character. Okay, now here comes another one. We can actually maneuver around our controls to make them look better. Like for instance, I really want to move my neck control up a little bit and maybe scale it in like that. The problem is now my pivot point's not on my joint. So in this case, what I can do is I can hold down D and then V to snap just and to move just the actual pivot point around. Now we want it right on our joint, so I'm going to hide my geometry again. So this is right where we want it. So I'll hold down D and V and just snap it right in there. I'm clicking middle mouse when I do this. It makes it a little easier, but I know you can click just the left mouse button as well. Okay, now look around and make sure all my controls are in the right pivot points. If you have your geometry, it's very easy to accidentally do this. And if they're not right on top of the joint will kind of swim around it and it'll give like a really weird, awkward angle. Now, I didn't create one for the hips, and I didn't create one for the actual head instead. And I'm going to show you why, because all these controls are going to be rotation controls like this. So they're pretty consistent. But now if I created another circle down for our hips, like let's say I duplicated this, I could scale this up, but it could be very confusing for the animator to say, is this the hips or is this the hips? Is this the back? Is this the back? So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cube and snap that up there to give us a range. And if you think about it, our hips are rigid anyway, so a cube encapsulates that whole hip area to show you, hey, this is controlling this. The same thing we're going to do for the head, because the head's actually, you know, controlling a region. So in that case, I'm going to create a polycube just so I can trace on top of it. Oh, I'm hiding my polygon objects, so let me bring that back. And I'm just going to move it off to the side so it's a little easier to see. I'm going to go into my CV curve tool. We'll make sure we're on linear mode. I'm on cubic right now. And I'm going to trace around the outside of this object. Let me select it first so I can focus on it. Okay, and then we can hold down V and just click around. that box. Like I said, it does okay if they overlap. Now I'm getting hooked on one of the joints in the foot. So just, there you go. Okay, so hit enter. And now you know something weird happened. My pivot point's all the way back here because that's how it draws curves. It always focuses on the pivot point. So I can just go center pivot and put it right there. Okay. So I have my palette tools. I have my control icons. And I'm going to just duplicate this and move it up. And the reason why I duplicate them is because I might want to use those controls later. And once I'm locked them in, they're kind of hard to see. So let's just... I'll scale it to put into position. Okay. Doesn't look too bad. And it doesn't have to be this exact shape, but I like my control regions to be cubes, while my my circles. Now, traditionally, we're going to get into more different types of control systems later on, but controls that can translate, I normally do box-shaped objects, and things that can rotate, I do curved, like circles and things like that. So to finish this off, I'm going to actually move the pivot point up. So I'm going to hide my geometry again. Hold down D and V and just snap that right in. There we go. And now it knows it's going to control that region. Okay, so the last one, I am going to duplicate my cube again, and I'm going to bring it up for the head. And just scale it out. Like so. Now it's very easy to select. And of course the pivot point is not going to be centered here. It's going to be at the base of the neck. So I'll hide my geometry and hold down D and V and snap right to that pivot point. Okay, so we're almost set here. The only thing now we have to do is we have to clean them and name them. So our first priority is to get them into position and make them look good. Then we have to clean them, and then we have to name them. So I'm going to select all the controls. Actually, not all the controls. I'm going to shift and unselect my two controls at the bottom, and then I'm going to freeze them. I'm going to say modify, freeze transforms, and I'm going to delete history on them. Now at this point, we're only going to delete by type. We're never going to delete all by type, because that'll delete all the history in the entire character, and that will cause a lot of problems down the line if we keep doing that. Okay, so now our controls are positioned and clean, and now we can start naming them. I can bring them back. It's a good time to test to see if they're easy to select. So this is going to be my head icon. So our suffix icon will be at the end of all our controls. So here's our neck icon. I'm even going to put in my the side, my orientation. Even though you're only going to have one head icon, I want to be able to focus on center, left, and right very easily. So this is my last. So let me go down to the bottom and do my hips first. Now I notice right here my hips are a little hard to select because I was going to select my skin instead. So I am going to scale this out a little bit more. And do it like that too. And freeze it. Okay. And this is going to be our center hips icon. And then we'll go through our back and we can see maybe we want to scale up this control a little bit too, so it doesn't get into conflict with the square or the cube. I'll freeze that one too. This is going to be our center back O1 icon, CT back O2 icon, and so forth. It's pretty sure I knew how many control icons I had here, but I was just trying to make sure. Okay, and we're almost done. There we go. And now that's positioning our control icons. Now we haven't actually connected them yet, but now we're in position. They look good, they're clean, and they're ready to go on to the next step.